Hello and welcome. Today I'm talking a bit about self-publishing. My name is Lyndon, Baptiste and I am a writer and content creator from Trinidad and Tobago. In 2008, I published my first book. Since then, I've gone on to publish about 12 books in total. That includes books for Michael Courier, Kevin Jared Hussein, Graham Lord, and I also had a competition for Caribbean writers because back then I noticed, a lot of people have the ambition to write. But there's great difficulty in terms of getting the book published and finding out the exact process behind it. And I wanted to give, if I could use the term aspiring writers, I wanted to give aspiring writers the opportunity to have their work published. So through my website, potbake.com, where you could get more information about my books, we launched this competition. And with the help of my dad and some different writers locally, we selected some winning stories and we put them into books. That book is called Across the Caribbean. We went on and we had a project called Jewels of the Caribbean. And in those two books, you could hear stories from aspiring writers that live in Barbados, Guyana, St. Lucia, Antigua. Recently, on Facebook and TikTok, after a long time of not talking about my books, I threw out a video where I asked folks if they had any questions about writing and publishing in the Caribbean, that they could feel free to let me know in the comment section. And I was pleasantly surprised at how many people had questions about the process. And I guess you could say I felt a little bit guilty in terms of, the skills and the knowledge that I've gathered over the years with the help of the people that I work with, that I haven't been contributing to the field and informing people and educating people about the process. So I'm thankful for the questions and I'm going to go through them. Some of them are questions about the book publishing process and the editing process, and I will try to be brief and clear about each step as I knew it back in 2008 and what I've learned over the years, and hopefully it helps you in your process and your book publishing journey. So the first question is from the Big Ben 69, and this is on TikTok. And this question is, how can I get published? I have written a book. And thanks for your question. I appreciate it. So there are two routes you could follow when you want to get published. You could follow the route of self-publishing and the traditional publishing route. The traditional publishing route is where you send your draft or your manuscript out to an agent. And there are different websites where you could connect with agents. I can't think about any offhand, but if I come across any, I will put them in the show notes that you could have links to them. The traditional route is where you send your manuscript to one of these agents, and then on your behalf, they would go to the book publishing firms and try to, get your work out there or to get a contract for you. One of the publishers that I could think about that we have access to in the Caribbean and that does that type of work is People Press. I've come across them and I became more familiar with them when they were doing the Bocas Lit Fest. And they're one of the publishers that I've worked with Bocas over the years. So they even have an option that you could submit your manuscript to them. I've been on their website. This is a long time ago. But where you could submit your manuscript and I guess they review it. And, if they think your work has marketing value or sales value in it, I guess they will take the project a little bit further. Back in 2008, that wasn't the route I followed because I didn't want, maybe it's a little bit of stubbornness, I didn't want anyone to, control the process and what I could do, or I have to wait 6 months to 1 year to say, yes, we've approved the project and we want to work with it. So today I could talk to you all about the self-publishing route. And the process in terms of getting published was first, sitting down, finishing the book as you have Big Ben, and then all that's left for me to do then is to get this book formatted put it into a form that a printer could work with it. But I had a couple of struggles back then. The first thing was, I needed to start a publishing company. That's the process I thought I needed to follow. And then secondly, because I'm not going to let anyone have any creative say over my work, I now had the responsibility of editing the book. And then I have the responsibility of finding a printer. So I don't want you to think that it is at all an easy process, but in the same breath, I would say it's not hard. You just have to have the dedication, because you're probably thinking about the money and the finances of getting this done. And if you're reaching out, I think the most important part of the book writing and publishing process is the editing. Because editing that is where you have the opportunity, it's like putting the fine details on a house. I could have, if you want to think about your story as a red brick structure around you. Right? It has a structure, it has doors that leads to other chapters and whatnot. But I want to refine the story so that it is in a form that when a potential reader reads it, they will say, even if you've used colloquial language or standard English, as we may call it, that you've put thought, it's an effortless read. There aren't too many errors. So I'm thankful to have a good support team next to me. That's my wife, Kimberly Badlou, my dad, Lance Baptiste, who has written his own book, my mom, and different folks along the way who have given of their time to contribute to the story. Now, you'd notice there that the people I'm calling are their family members. And that's how I was able to keep the cost of the project down. So, because if you go out there to hire an editor, whether it's on a site like Fiverr or somebody able to hook up with locally, then you have, it could be a costly project. I've seen editors that probably say they charge 19 cents per word. And then what are you hiring that person for? Are you hiring them as a proofreader? Or are you hiring them as an editor that needs to restructure your story at times? Maybe tell you where you need to. I could think about my most recent project with Dad, the Ghost of Caura, where if it took Dad about a year or more to write that book, we were probably editing that project for about 2 years and having to revisit it and then write later chapters. So when you put in the finishing details on your story, it is quite a process. To continue with, how do you get the book published? So I'm now assuming that you've written the book, you've edited it, and you are at the stage where I want to get it into hard copy. And I'm talking here particularly about self-publishing your book. Self-publishing your book, my process was, I had to go to NALIS because as far as I know, all books need to have an ISBN number, right? So I had to go to NALIS, the Technical Services Department, and get an ISBN number. And then I had to find a printer. I called a number of printers to work with. I got quotes from different ones, and I eventually settled on a printery called Graphic Scripts Printing. They're located in Cane Farm. I'll give out the gentleman's number. His name is Mr. Fareed Mohammed, and his phone number is 640-2379. And I worked with them to publish my first book, which was 90 Days of Violence. And that's this book here. So how did it work? Because when you write in your story, more than likely it will be like you have your default page format set to 8.5 by 11 inches. So he was able to give me specifications as to, I print my book at 5.5 inches by 8 inches. So he would give me the dimensions, and then he would tell me certain things like the page margins, the font size, the headers, footers. And luckily, I have the skill that I was able to do this for myself. And I did it all in Microsoft Word. I want to say that again. The contents of this book, from the copyright page to the table of contents to the chapter heading, everything that I did is inside of Microsoft Word. When you're working with a printer, whether it's locally, whether it is a traditional or a digital printer, whether it's on a site like CreateSpace, Amazon, whoever you hook up with, whether it's Graphic Scripts locally, they would give you the specifications for margin sizes, page formatting, and whatnot. One of the things I'm thinking about doing in the near future, God willing, is kind of re-entering the book formatting type business. So that's, if you have projects like that, we could probably talk about it eventually. Now with Graphic Scripts, if it is that I had the manuscript just at 8.5 by 11 inches, I could have passed that along to them, and they would have then be able to say, well, okay, we will do the book formatting for you. Whether it involved a cost or not, that would be entirely up to the arrangement. Let's talk about the printing cost. To print this book, which has, this is 90 Days of Violence, my first book, which has about 260 pages. In 2008, it cost me $25 per copy. And I printed 1,000 of these books. So that is how much you could estimate prices would have since changed. But the price to print the book is entirely up to the page count, whether you have color inside. This is just a black and white, no color images, only the front cover and the back cover is in color and is UV coated or protected. So you have different, you could work with that perhaps as an estimate, but it is all based on the quantity that you want printed. So back then, to give you all a little backstory there, I was fortunate. I had a job. I had some savings. I went to my mom, and because I thought it was a fantastic idea, I was like, Mom, you could loan me some money and get the book printed. And they were very supportive of me, even as a grown man in terms of getting the book published. So when we talk about you have the writing process, which you, the writer, you have to do. You have to sit down and get the work in. But if you're looking at doing this on a budget, you need people close to you, and maybe you need to know things like getting your front cover designed and whatnot. You have a lot of sites like Canva, Adobe Express. Your smartphone probably has a good camera. You could keep your front cover design very simple and just work with text. So you don't necessarily have to hire a graphic artist or an editor to do things. If you have a good support team, definitely you could keep the cost of your project down. You need people, you need to be in a space, I should say, where you're open to constructive type feedback from the people you love and you trust. If you're married and you have a spouse and they have time that they could invest in you along those lines, spouses are really good at detecting problems, even with our writing. So yeah, lean on the people that support you. So Shanice Macmillan asked the same question about self-publishing a book, and Lana asks, what is the process to get a book published? The whole process starting from the writing. And I hope I've covered that sufficiently in the first question that I've answered. I know now that the bulk of what we do is really based on the dedication to sit down and write and the commitment to spend time editing your book. It's a very simple formula that I work with. If I spend 1 month writing something, I want to spend 3 times the effort editing it. That person, when they're reading it, the pages should just be turning because you've committed to doing that type of work. King Banton says, looking forward to reaching out. I'm working on my first book. Congratulations, King Banton. Keep up the effort and working with it. Jessel Mahis asked, I would like to write a book. What is the general structure that I should use? If they vary by topic or type of book, can you guide me? I'm going to answer this question from my point of view. When do they vary in structure? I find, like when a story comes to me, I hope I'm answering your question here. When a story comes to me, I find like the structure is kind of determined by my headspace. I don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about it. For example, one of the first questions you might ask is, well, should I write this from a first-person point of view? Should it be from a third-person point of view? If we're talking things like general structure, the point of view that you write it from, it kind of makes up the story. Has a mind of its own. I've heard people say that. I don't know if it's cliche to say it. But I have found that to be true, that, and in the same breath, I've written stories already where it may have started in a third-person type structure, and then it flips to, hey, no, this something about it doesn't sound right. I have the essence of the story is there, but I now need to change it to a first-person point of view. General structure of a storyline once it's started and you've made a decision like that. So you have to be willing to revisit and change structure because your goal is just to write a better story. And you're not writing the story for you, you're writing the story for the reader. And you want to really make that a conscious decision to, kind of balance your creative point of view with the something that the viewer will enjoy. Let's go into the structure of the story itself. You have things like that we may have learned in school with regards to descriptive writing, the storyline, the dialogue behind it. One thing I will say about structure that I appreciate as time goes by is I try not to spend too much of time with the descriptive writing. I could think about writers I've read and they spend a lot of, and I've made this mistake myself. So you spend a lot of time on descriptive writing. You're describing the house, you're describing the backyard, and you're going to town on the colors of the leaves, how many leaves the trees has, the fruits. You just keep people are most interested. I make videos. I write stories. People are interested in people. So I just like to keep the story moving forward. And I find, as the years go by, if I was to start back writing a bit more, I will really concentrate on the storyline, the people as they move through the story, and not spend too much of time on the descriptive writing. Dialogue is always fun to write because you have the opportunity with whether someone's speaking to themselves or two or more people, just, and you trying to really, every line of dialogue that comes out, it says something about the person and their thinking and where their heart is and their motivation. So I always have fun writing dialogue. And as time goes by and you practice, you find that you will be able to get a hang of the craft. So, Jessel, I hope I've answered your question sufficiently. This question comes from a username on TikTok that goes by No Name Comes to Mind. That's a great username. One of many. Do local publishing companies require a complete draft? Do we have literary agents locally? Are they even needed? So let's start answering with the last question. You don't need them if you decide to self-publish. Do we have literary agents locally? If we do, I've never come across a portal that has a list of these agents. I'm not aware of any kind of international portals, and if there are Caribbean literary agents available on them. What I imagine would happen is if you think about like the local publishing companies, I tend to hear about Pariah Publishing. But what I hope to do is I hope to reach out to one of these publishing companies that may have agents of their own and have a podcast type question and answer session with them so I could learn a little bit more. Something else I'm working on is being able to reach out to, I have a particular writer in mind that has been quite successful in terms of publishing deals and winning competitions, and I hope to speak to them in a future episode of this podcast about what that traditional publishing route has been for them and some of the things that they've followed in terms of getting themselves on the map and on the list repeatedly. Chris Prasad, how do you publish a poetry book? The process is the same. The formatting steps, we went through the editing. When I did my first book, 90 Days of Violence, I quickly realized that I wanted it to become available on Amazon.com as a Kindle copy. Back then, I didn't have the experience or perhaps the proper motivation to say, I'm going to investigate what this is, how to do it myself. And I discovered a company called iUniverse. And what they do is they help writers get self-published. So they have their website, you submit your draft, they do the editing and formatting for you so you don't need to think about it. And then they are like a channel into Amazon.com that you could have your book available and also the Kindle copies behind it. So I went to them. And what they do is, of course, you pay a fee to submit your work, to have it formatted. You could pay additional fees to have it edited as well. They don't come cheap. Back when I did it, I couldn't have afforded it. But I already had my book edited. They formatted it based on their specifications and they made it available on Amazon.com as a hard copy and as an ebook. What they do is that as your book sells, they take a piece of the profit, which is fair, right? They're doing the work and they're the middleman for you. But I quickly realized that if I had the proper motivation, I could do this myself. So I canceled, even after having paid the price in some cases there, I canceled that book and I did it myself. So there's the Kindle Direct Publishing, your same Amazon account that you have access to, that you log in to do your shopping and whatnot. You could go to Kindle Direct Publishing and you could create a publisher account and you could submit whether it's a hard copy type format. Of course, you will need to read the specifications as to how to format your book. We'll talk about that a bit more if you have questions about it later on. But you go into how to format your book, how to submit it as the correct format for the e-publishing, the e-copy of it, and they make it available. There's no middleman. You set the price and everything, and then based on the price that you set, you get commissions for it. So that is watching one or two YouTube videos, reading the guidelines that are available to you on the Kindle Direct Publishing. These are things that you could do for yourself. And you cut out the middleman, and then you have, whenever you get a sale, is all the profit coming towards you. The hard copies, if you go that route as well, when someone orders it on Amazon.com, because they are digital printing house, so to say, what they would do is they would at that point print a copy. So you do not have, like when I did 90 Days of Violence and I had to stand the cost of each copy, it is generated at that point in time, and then you get compensated based on the royalties that are clearly outlined. So that would have addressed a question in terms of from 868_Vin_868. That was the question, advice on writing an ebook. So you could look up the Kindle Direct Publishing and you sign up for it with your Amazon account. Sunil RC101 has a question on how do you start a biography? And I don't have any good answers for you because I've never written a biography on anyone. But I will say this. I have picked up different biographies, and looking at them, I just get the impression that the writer just dumps a set of information on you that's loaded with dates, that's loaded with family background, history, and it feels difficult for me as the reader to kind of comprehend a story. And I think because a story is lacking. So I suspect I will really enjoy a biography if it is written from the point of view of almost like a work of fiction, and a story is unraveling that gets to the point of, whatever the ultimate goal is, whether the person gets married and the story ends there, or the person eventually dies. So in my own taste as a reader, I'll say writing a biography, I have enjoyed ones that follows a kind of narrative storyline type pathway. So let's get now to user Syra Musa Romances, how to hook up with local bookstores. And hooking up with local bookstores is quite easy. It's as simple as making a phone call to them and saying, I've written a book, I'd like to send one for you to review or to accept. What I will say, the challenging or the hard part is managing the relationship with them. And I'm saying this based on my experience. So, hooking up with them was as simple and as straightforward as me reaching out to, Charon's. I have Charon's bookstore. And I went with them and I was like, hey, I have this book. Will you all accept it? And I was fortunate to make contact with the owner there in Trinidad Mall. And he's like, yeah, all right, cool. And I believe like it may have been around Christmas time, which is your best time for sales. And I think about the early days of being able to go to the mall around Christmas time. I have my little table outside and I'm selling this 90 Days of Violence books. A lot of the bookstores, so simple as calling. The bookstores, the bulk of my experience with them is that they take your books on consignment. Meaning that they don't pay you up front for it, because you may have a price that you give them and then they sell it, they retail it, and they give you your money and they keep the amount allocated to them, right? So for instance, when my 90 Days of Violence first came out, I was selling it for $100. And then my book after that, Boy Days, I was selling it for $100. And I would give it to them for $80. They sell it for $100. They keep 20. They give me 80. But it's on consignment. And you may give 5-10 books. And then you have the experience now of managing that relationship with different bookstores, which is returning to the bookstore, checking up how many books sold. Maybe I've had scenarios where 1 of 10 books sold, and then you visit again, 8 books sold, and then all the books are sold out, and you're paid at that point in time. They keep their cut. What I've found is that over time, and I'm not speaking here about Charon's bookstore, I just was sharing my experience with them in terms of my first book. As I reached out to different bookstores across Trinidad and Tobago, and they all taken their books on consignment, I am now in the situation where I have thousands of dollars in books outside over a long period of time, and I certainly was not managing my billing and my invoicing and following up. I could think about going to bookstores where I've seen clearly that my books are sold out, and I have not followed up with them. Who's guilty of it? Me, the writer, who now has to play the role of being a marketing and salesperson because I've self-published my book. It isn't available that I have someone that is an agent on my behalf doing this work for me. So you see, when you self-publish a book, you become way more than a writer. To save money, you edited your book. To save money, you've formatted your book. To save money, you've reached out to bookstores and say, would you all take my book? And then you're managing accounts. You're managing sales and marketing. I've gone into making YouTube videos and podcasts like this with the hope that it could, apart from me taking great joy in teaching people things, of course, I would love if it could translate into a sale. Have these things worked remarkably well so that I could sustain a living as a writer? No. Even after having a YouTube page, Facebook, TikTok with, and I say this with, in all modesty, thousands of followers, it does not translate into, because I've never been focused on sales the way that I need to if I wanted to sustain a living.